to our discussion from our roundtable discussion in a straight line with some of the founding fathers of the Miata. My name's Keith Tanner. I'm going to be effectively the moderator in this, trying to keep some conversation going. It's my first attempt at a talk show, so we'll see how that goes. And I'll let you all introduce yourselves.
Sure.
Ken?
Sure. Thank you. Good to be here. Good to see all you guys out here. I assume everybody's having a pretty good day today. A lot of cars out screeching on the track. That's good. I'm Ken Saward. I was a senior designer and chief designer at Mazda. I started Mazda in 1990 and I left in 2000. So I spent 30 years at Mazda. It was a great experience there. Obviously got to work with Tom and with Mark and Bob, and Norman left a little bit before I got there, but it was a good run. I was responsible for the second gen MX-5, the NB, and I originally came from New York. I'll talk a little bit about tonight when I make my presentation, but from New York, I went to school at Pasadena at Art Center, and then when I got out of school, I went to Chrysler, worked there for a few years, and then I came out to California after realizing the Michigan winters are not something I wanted to be there too often. So I moved out to California. I got a job with Mazda, and yeah, my career went from there and had some great opportunities besides MX-5, Mazda 6, a lot of show cars. We did a lot of the SEMA cars, the MX-5 concepts. Part of that from probably 2005 on. We did show cars, the Ferrari, the Cabura. So I've seen a lot of cool stuff going through Mazda, and it's been a real, for me, it's a blessing. I look back on my career, and it's been a really amazing time. So, and now this just kind of tops it off to be here to see you guys and see what we do and see how much joy it brings you guys is something pretty amazing.
And this event is the 25th anniversary of the NB as well, isn't it? So it's a momentous one.
Oh, it's cool. That's fun being up there. I'll hand it off to the guy everybody knows here.
Well, I don't know. Hi, everybody. You know, this is how many years ago we started this, Bob?
Boy, 92.
Never mind.
Never mind.
We're losing our memory anyway. Now, you know, I started calling myself a Miata Papa, but now it's like a great grandpa or something. But the whole point of it is, my part of it is, if we didn't do it then, and the whole convertible car is going to be disappear from this earth. And if we did it that time, and the kids growing up with the people at that time going to continue this in another years or two or whatever. Now here, 35 years later, we're still going. So I'm really happy. And looking back at all the fortunate circumstances, having all these guys coming together at the same time, in the right time to do it, and that's the only way this whole phenomena happened. And then we ignited the whole thing, but after that, it's all yours to keep it going. And then I'm happy to see this is still going. Here's Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Jordan. I went to the Art Center, same as Ken, in Pasadena. I graduated in '78, and while I was there, I happened to meet a fellow who's an avid car enthusiast named Jim Hall. And Jim and I became really good friends, and then we became roommates. And that's how I got to know Bob. So that had implications far down the road. But no, I started Mazda in 1983. I believe Tom came in
Yeah, you're a
12
year
months
ahead
later.
of me.
Yeah, like 12 months later. And I worked there till 2009, and I worked on a lot of fun projects too. There was a lot of great opportunity there. Some projects like the MX-6 and the B-Series truck, and just some concept cars. But yeah, it's great to see everybody here. The last big Miata event I was at the Indy introduction. And when my wife and I drove up the hill and parked yesterday, I just couldn't believe what the camaraderie is with Miata owners and the lifestyle and how animated this car is and how it offers this kind of simple freedom. And it's just great to see you all here, and we just thank you for all your support and that you're even interested to come to this little panel discussion. So, thank you.
That's
good.
No, just a living. So this is really a funny coincidence because I met Bob at the auto show in LA. I left Japan 2 years prior, and he was reading this Japanese magazine, this blonde-headed kid's reading the Japanese magazine. So I went up and said, "Can I take a look?" He said, "That's how we struck the friendship." Little did I know, a few years later, Bob said, "We're gonna start the studio in Mazda. So you interested?" I said, "Well, sure, yes," because I was in Munich and like 20 below zero. And I thought, oh, warm Southern California. So I just said yes. I didn't know what the job, what salary or anything. I just said yes. Anyway, then my friend in Germany, Opel, says, "I have a Mark Jordan here in my house tonight because we are doing a farewell. He's going to Mazda." This is a year prior. I didn't know I'm coming to Mazda, but I spoke with him on the phone. Little did I know that time, and that was the first. And his dad hired me to GM for a few years prior. So it's all this kind of weird connection.
It's a small family.
Yeah.
It really is. So I'm Norman Garrett. I joined 1 month after Tom. There was way too much creativity and not enough engineering going on, so I guess I hired an engineer. And I was a Georgia Tech educated engineer, fascinated with racing and experienced in racing. So getting into this and being handed the Miata project right at the first start was fantastic. And everybody remembers the day they met Bob Hall. So I came in and saw the energy and intellect in Bob's mind for his product plan for the Miata from the first plate model that had been passed around and approved. And from then on, it was Katie barred the door. So it was just a fantastic project from day one. And then we fought about hood lines and fender cuts and door cuts and all the things you fight about that a beautiful shape that was coming to be, how to make it actually a sports car. And we talked about it this morning, that to make a car that you love as much, even if you were blindfolded, even if you never saw it. So it's the long-term durability, the enthusiasm for the Miata. I like to stand to represent the engineers at Mazda in Japan that put the thing together. But it was a passion. We all were in love with the same girlfriend without the jealousy from the beginning.
Oh, wow.
This will help clear up something that Mark has previously said. I am Jim Hall's identical twin brother. The evil twin. We have two twins. One is evil and one is good, so Jim's automatically the evil twin, who's older than me by 7 damn minutes. He ended up going to work at GM, believe it or not. Became a lifer there and just retired. But I stumbled into Mazda from being a pretty miserable journalist. I wanted to go to Art Center, and Mark and I once talked about this. I started drawing before I was in Art Center, I was still in high school. I kept drawing the same car over and over. And I said, I've lost it. And Mark said, oh yeah, that happens, you get over it. Right. So I gave up. But I ended up in journalism and got befriended by Mr. Yamamoto, who at that time was head of R&D at Mazda. And for some reason, he thought they should hire me. So after he had his sanity test, they hired me. And I joined in to the design and planning department, which was made up of 3 people. And I came in and I actually did design work, which Tom probably never saw because I stopped before he joined. But I'm very happy to say that none of it was put into production, which is one reason Mazda is still in business. But so I was raised by an American guy who went to England, shot down German airplanes, came back to the States, brought his crummy English car with him, fell in love with English cars, and I ended up sitting in the back seat of Austin Healey's and Triumphs that didn't have a back seat, but I sat there anyway. And this is in Southern California. They're always top down, and that's it. Got under my skin. And one day we're going out to a concours at Vista Del Mar, west side of Los Angeles, going down Olympic Boulevard, and the car stopped because the SU fuel pump in Austin Healey died. And I kept thinking to myself, why couldn't you have a car that's as good as this, that's more reliable? And I bought a Datsun 510 in high school. And I suddenly realized there's quality in a car that you don't want to drive. There had to be a way to mix it, and that's where the seed got planted. And I just decided I'd pass the virus on to as many as I could. It looks like you guys got it too. Okay? And I'm very pleased you do. And I hope more importantly, you're pleased with the car, regardless. Because that's most important. It's not me, it's not Tom, it's you guys, right? And you guys too. I remember Brian Cameron. Next vision.
All right. So this is basically just going to be a question and answer session. We just want to get some good stories out of you guys, some peek into what it was like back in the day when you were creating this car. So those of you who are here, if you do have questions as we go on, please do put your hand up, let us know. Those of you who are online, we do have somebody monitoring the phones over there. So we'll do our best to answer those questions as well. And I've got a few of my own that we picked up from different spots. One of the ones that I really want to know, as someone who has worked in the aftermarket for a while, is what did you want to do to the car but were not able to because of time constraints or budget constraints or legislative constraints? What one change would you have made or didn't make it into production because you couldn't?
If you're talking about regulatory issues, quite frankly, nothing. Because the idea was to make this car work as a car that could be bought and sold anywhere. Some of the changes I would have liked to see were cosmetic and based purely on my own personal opinion and therefore of no value whatsoever.
That's why we had to separate you and Tom. Is that what's going on here?
But I think the thing with the Miata is that as I saw what we were building was a car that we could all love, that others could love, that then they love it so much, they become the last designer of the car by adding what they want to make it what they want. I want a little more power, I want weight on the back, and that's something that it's hard to do, but because of the simplicity and the straightforwardness of the vehicle and the fact that the concept is the straight arrow, it actually lends itself to that, for this interpretation for you guys. And that's the important part, because one reason my opinion about the car styling, the changes, which are minor, is that I'm gonna buy one, and we need to sell 60,000. So if somebody says I'll buy 60,000, well, what do you want? Okay, 1.9 headlights, here they come. But yeah, that's. I don't think there's a thing. You, Tomo? Anybody here think there was a change in anything made?
I'll have to say, I drove a prototype in '88 at a SSCA autocross event, and at a kind of a secret showing that Mazda did in, I think, November of '88. And we, with great anticipation, had delivered the specifications for the car, the engineering specs, the targets for handling and power, etc. And then it was, it was over the cubicle wall, to use the corporate term, and we were hoping it would come back from Japan, as we expected it to be. And when I got in that car, I redlined it in first, redlined it in second, went to a left-hand turn, lift throttle, it stepped out perfectly, I stepped back in the throttle, it stepped out more, it hit the apex and corner out was perfect, and I said, I cannot believe. The car was literally a step to the life of what, in a perfect way, exactly what we had programmed it to be. And it was eerie how well the car came out from an engineering standpoint. And that's Tachibana and everybody at Miyoshi and Horizon who just kept tuning the car and getting it right. Not giving up until the sound was right, the shifter was right, the turn in was right, the lift throttle oversteer was right.
The door slam, they actually thought about that.
Exactly. I mean, the Japanese were excellent, and Tom can speak more to this, about detail engineering. Americans are good at concepts, C4 Corvette, fine concept, actual details, not so much. So in the Japanese world, it's all details, and Bob can tell stories where we would have to put up velvet ropes around the clay models, because Tom would show a clay model, and the Japanese would go right up on the model and start looking at the details, which is not what the model was about. It was more stand back 20 feet, we'd put up velvet ropes and say stand back and look at the whole car. Then do your detail work later. So not to belabor the point, but Mazda did such an excellent job at the details of the car that kept its character, and we gave them the targets for the character, but they found a way to interpret that, caught the virus, and developed a car that was the embodiment of the spirit. And it was not a committee car at all, which is very hard for a Japanese company or any company to not do a committee car. But it was as if Colin Chapman or Ferdinand Porsche or some singular person had pushed the program through.
Can I relay excuse me, sorry guys, but we had a fellow who ran the local facility named Mr. Uchiyama. And Uchiyama went to a meeting in Japan. This is where they're on the point of approving the car as a real production car. And Yamamoto asked Uchiyama, what do you think of the sports car project with your staff? And Uchiyama said, I don't think it makes any sense. We're not gonna build many of them. It's a lot of money for this. And he said, and Yamamoto said, okay, thanks. But then Uchiyama said, wait a minute, he says, there is one thing I don't understand. He says, with the guys working on this, and I'm not talking about the Americans, I'm talking about the Americans, the Japanese. It's a religion. He said, and I don't know this religion. So he said, I could very well be wrong.
That's very interesting.
And Yamamoto, that was a factor in making the decision. I learned much later after he had retired, and we went out for some bourbon.
Any other comments?
No, it sounds like a Uchiyama.
It doesn't. And remember Uchiyama, this one?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
And a purple velvet jacket.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
remember that.
Huh?
I don't remember.
Oh,
that.
no.
Purple velvet jacket.
Every Mazda engineer got a press interview. They have this velvet jacket.
They wear for the interview?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
It's like a
unknown
uniform.
reason why they had a uniform or something. But anyway, that's another story.
Okay.
You want to say something?
Oh, I was just thinking that when the first pre-production cars came in, and we stood back and looked at them, you know, we're of course very happy, but I thought, we need a little trim on maybe the front spoiler, or rear valence, or a little rear deck spoiler. So we got our set the car up on this clay platform, and we modeled these little pieces, and I think they became very popular. In fact, coming up here today, I was passing an NA, and I go, oh, where's our kit? You know, we did that in-house, and I think it really finished the car off nice. That kind of completed it for me.
That's the front lip.
Yeah.
and the
Yeah,
rear
the
end.
little
rear
front
lip,
thing,
the front
yeah.
lip. Yeah.
Yeah, we
the
did
rear
all the curvatures and stuff to put the hands and feel good about it, and come to the bottom, every car in the world
Cut
shot
off.
flat.
Yeah.
Because of engineering reasons, okay, mostly, and Japanese shipping reasons too, by the ramp angles and stuff. But anyway, we wanted to complete the design to the whole character of the car, so did those spoilers and rear lips and stuff. And they're reproducing now, so you can.
Yeah, they're reproducing.
Yeah, that's complete.
We wore out
But
a
another
tool.
reason, what Bob said is, or Mark said, the Japanese go close look. Japanese never had a car 100 feet away from you or 50 feet away from you in a freeway following. You can see the underneath of the cars. They don't never care about hiding the guts underneath. If you look at the Japanese cars at that time, or, you know, like fuel tanks hanging down, the suspensions every which way. So closing that from the distance is very important for us to complete and clean the rear view. And another thing is every Japanese had a straight line with a rectangular tail lamp and a license plate. That's
Oh, yeah.
signature, because they spend all the time designing the front end, because so they park the cars rear end into the garage, and not many freeway with a one-way street that you fall in the rear end all the time. So they see the front end is more important. So they put all this intricate detail in front, come to the back straight with a tail lamp and a license plate. And I thought, to Mazda to make an impact into the market, I want to have memorable rear end. Now that statement got me into a lot of trouble in another way. Remember that? But
She
that's
slapped you
another-
hard, didn't she?
Yeah,
Call
that was
HR.
way ahead of time actually. But anyway, that's what I wanted to do, because we see more rear end. If you look at it, you park the cars in front end to the parking lot. When you get out of the building, you see the rear end, right? So why not? So that's how we, as a Mazda design team in the US, decided to have a Mazda identity, have memorable rear end. And when somebody passes you on the Mazda, you remember that three-quarter view of the car. And I wanted to make every car Mazda built should have that memorable rear end. And that was the whole point of the design theme that we started. And, right? So,
Very good point.
that was
I can't let that go without a little addition to the story. So, as Tom mentioned, the rear end is the most visible part of the car for most of us. If you see it on the freeway, you drive up to cars, you see the back of it. And so when I started at Mazda, obviously, so Tom is my mentor. So At one point, he says, "Come on, we're gonna go to lunch. I'll take you to this place."
Oh, no.
No, and end of the day, and so Tom just wanted us to understand like form, and so we looked at a lot of different forms to understand cars. It's a famous story, but no, the bottom line is the
It's
HVAC.
recorded, okay? Be careful.
No, the bottom line is
just
Tom.
it's going out
Tom-
live.
Yes, live.
Really?
No, what I want to say is that Tom had this understanding of form and to understand that like what people see in cars, and the point he made about seeing cars from far away was another strong point that like in Japan, everything is small, the buildings are tall, so every car you look at, you're just looking at the details and the headlights. And with Mazda and with us being in California, the idea was you do see cars from far away on the freeway, so you see them in a different context than you would in Japan. And so that was the beauty of the Miata, was that it was a very simple design. I mean, you could argue it was almost too simple, but part of being simple made it sort of timeless, but it also allowed the car to kind of age really well. It didn't become dated. And a lot of it, again, was the fact that you see cars differently in the States than you see them somewhere else.
I don't think we got the full story about what you and Tom did when you went to lunch, so I think we might have glossed over that a little bit.
We have another, we
Moving on.
can talk tomorrow.
We got lots of time.
It's too early in the day.
Yeah, we can talk about it after dinner tonight. No, but I think, to be really honest, I think Tom's point is well taken, that you see cars differently in different contexts. And in Japan and in Asia, you see it very differently than you would see it here. And that was part of the reason the studios were in California. One was to get away from the motherships in Japan, but the other was the light out here. It was very unique and very special. So when we reviewed cars in light in California, the cars looked a lot different than they do, say, living in Michigan, where it's cloudy all the time and you never see sunlight. So.
And it's warmer in California. I think we've covered that a couple
Oh,
of
yeah,
times.
clearly, yeah. Well, I think we've all made that comment, that we were able to leave Michigan to go to California.
So I've got another question that was sent in, and this is about the influences of the Miata. And this is both from a stylistic standpoint and some from a, say, a handling benchmark, or there were some obvious benchmarks, the Elan, the MGB. I mean, those were very clearly influences on the Miata. But what unusual, like unexpected influences were there? Like benchmarks that you set for yourself for, say, for handling, for ride quality, for sound, one that people wouldn't expect. Was there anything unusual, or was it all just British but better?
And Norman has much more detail on this, but there was this general belief, and Hirai actually had a very strong feeling on this. If you were working at Mazda and you made a sporty version of the car, you'd always have what the engineers call hard suspension. And Japanese sporty cars could beat you to death. They were god awful because they felt that was sporty. Hirai had this idea that I suspect Norman helped nurture, was that you can have good riding in a car with handles great. And I remember he talked to me once and I said, the Italians do it reasonably well, as long as their cars run. In that Alfa Romeo had surprisingly soft springs, but they had very good roll control. And I think Hirai, that was a factor in the car. It rode better than you expected a small sports car to ride, but it didn't give anything away in it.
Very good. And I have to say on the Elan, say what these gentlemen can comment on the styling cues of a short deck, long hood Elan. From an engineering standpoint, we didn't take anything from the Elan, but its feeling. And we did one prototype test trip up, and I don't know where it would be, maybe you can tell me, some resort up in the mountains in near Miyoshi, the proving ground. And we had an MGB, an Alpha Spider 2000, a 911 Cabriolet, the Scimitar, the Reliant Scimitar, Lotus 7, and we drove up and down the mountains all day long, and the Lotus Elan. And we drove up and down the mountain all day long. The Elan had ball tires and no shock absorbers left, and it was the best handling car of the bunch. And you could just flick it around the corners because it was perfectly balanced and designed beautifully by Colin Chapman and his engineers. And at the end of the night, we had our debriefing, and everyone would give their evaluation of each car and what to bring from each of the cars. And from the engineering team, the Elan was the only one anybody would bring anything from, and it was always the feeling. Not the suspension, not the backbone chassis that couldn't handle a crash test, not anything about it, but the feeling. And that is what, that really gave a target for Tachibana and all the final tuning team to get the guts that Kojima-san and Mabashi-san and myself all designed into the packaging So it could be a great handling car, and then to make it a great handling car with a final tuning. So I would say those were the influences, but it's more philosophical than tit for tat.
But it was a surprise. I don't think any of us expected them to get the balance that good.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And on the first go, effectively.
Right.
Because, you know, the previous work on sports cars with Mazda, the Cosmo Sport had this very bizarre rear axle and was not engineered it was engineered well, but not tuned well at all.
Right.
And the RX-7, because of the transverse link they put on helped, but it was basically all that they knew about coil spring rigid rear axles.
Right.
So there were limits to its capability, particularly involved the balance between handling and ride. So that's why this, to me, with a company that really had no hardcore experience in this area, pulled it off so well.
But always had a real appetite for advanced suspension work from the
Oh, yeah.
Cosmo on. Fun fact, Harai's first job at Mazda was designing the advanced suspension
Yeah.
for the Cosmo.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's all I know.
What's the next question?
Do you people have any questions out there?
Yeah, we'll open it up to you guys.
Why do we hear crickets?
We've got a couple of YouTube questions if you want them.
Yeah.
Okay,
why-
what questions do we have?
They're very opinionated, but one of them is, what do you guys think of some of the engine swaps and modifications that are going on in Miatas?
They're great.
Is it a good thing, or do you think it's?
No, as I said before, they're great. Okay?
I'm just gonna repeat the question
Okay,
because I get picked up by the microphones. And the question is, how do you all feel about the engine swaps? Because obviously there have been engine swaps since the beginning, the Monster Miatas with the 5.0 right away and walking around the pits out here, there's all sorts of things. I'm guilty of a few of them myself. So what's your opinion of that?
Okay, I'll be real quick on this. I think they're great. Okay, because it's the customer doing what he wants. Okay? Now, some of them may have twice as many cylinders as I think a car needs, but that's another story altogether. Okay? But that doesn't mean they shouldn't be doing it. And the fact that people think about this, that they see the car as a canvas that's worthwhile, that to me is absolutely fantastic. And that's why I think the buyers and the owners are the best owners in the world. Okay? Because they're willing to go beyond what was handed to them on a plate. And I think that's wonderful. I mean, that's human creativity. Well, tell me what's better than that other than blueberries and cream. No, okay.
Any other comments on that?
Yeah, and when we originally conceived the Miata NA, we always had in mind, we wanted more involvement, mechanical involvement, going back to kind of where we were in the 60s and the 70s, where you could put your car in your garage on the weekend, you could work on it. You could put your hands in between the engine and the wheel well. And we did this called the Club Race or Club Sport, the yellow concept car for the Chicago show, and that was to show how you could take your Miata and put fender flares on it, make a cafe racer out of it, tune the engine and tune the suspension, put bigger wheels and tires, kind of a Cobra-ish type of thing. But the whole intention was have fun, work together as a family, work on your car and fix it exactly the way you want to fix it, whether it includes a bigger motor or not.
Well, the same thing goes to the interior, the panels on like an A and B and C. They have all this center console or the gauge covers, everything is kind of, separate pieces so you can customize it rather than big one piece molded piece that most cars were. And the engineer hates it because it's more rattles and stuff. Well, cost-wise, it's not really helping. But we are adamant that we have to have a customization. Each one of us could do something like that.
Those
So,
rattles are character.
yeah.
They're personality.
Well, okay. To a point that I want to have a engineered leak every Friday night in England. For UK market, the car's going to leak the drop of oil on the floor, so that you got an excuse to work on the car on the weekend.
There used to be a running joke about the MG conversion
Yeah,
kit,
yeah.
which was a drain plug that would leak just a
Yeah,
little
but
bit
we
all the
wanted
time.
to engineer it that way. And all the engineer look at me and say, "You crazy?" I said, "Well, you know the customer's better."
And there was also the Italian option. There was the Italian option that had a random number generator that would make it so the ignition system failed every once in a while.
Yeah. No. So the US market, I want to have a rattle built in. So a year and a half, there's a slight little rattle. dealer could fix it easily because it's computer programmable. But I wanted to have it so that people say, I got a convertible, got a rattle. But our engineer wouldn't want to have it, you know.
Imagine that.
Yeah, Japanese engineer to leak and rattle, so it didn't happen. I think looking back, it's a good idea they didn't do it.
There was another YouTube question?
Yeah, one more. Somebody was asking, do you think Mazda will bring back the really colorful cars? Because a lot of the newer ones have been very neutral compared
God, I hope so.
The question is about Mazda's current color palette, is a little on the monochromatic side, shall we say, isn't it? You know,
A
will
little.
Mazda bring back some vibrant colors?
Well, that's a little difficult thing. Mazda had a very smaller number of guns in the factory compared to other companies. Because there are multiple car lines, like minivans, and Miata comes in the same production line, which is never heard of in the US.
But in the first couple of years of Miata, we had, you know, obviously red and Mariner blue and white and silver and
But only
Pierce Racing
three
green
full
and
colors,
yellow.
right? But the other colors has to be shared with all the car lines to the entire world. So there were the little mechanical issues about it. So they can do a limited edition, switching the tank for 3,000 units at a time. That's why the yellows and British Racing greens. But I wrote the book, imaginative book about Collector's Guide to Miata. You know, it's like Collector's Guide to Lotus Elan, whatever, or Porsches.
This was during development?
No, before the car's being started, a kind of conceptual stage. So year 2, Mazda, you know, limited edition racing green. Year 5, there's like we introduced this and that. And then looking back, and they can have a you know, which model to look for, the lowest number, volume, or whatever. So that created a fictitious story about it. And then British Racing Green went really successful.
Oh, yeah.
So our marketing wanted to do another one the following year. I said, gotta be joking, you get the limited edition and do
Numbered,
another one.
and they were numbered.
Yeah. And then they do another one because it was success. I said, give me a break. 20 years from now, their book written, and it says, to the second year, Mazda produced Racing Green. And because of that success, Mazda Marketing decided to do another one in the following year. Can you live with that statement on the magazine? You know, like a book of collectors, and 20 years later, I wouldn't have it. So if you do a second generation to do the same combination, that's fair enough. But a same NA in a following year, that's like not really respectable. So, like that, you know, we stop a lot of things like that.
Insight, questions here?
I've actually got a question for Ken, since he's stuck out the end here, you don't get the.
Yeah, I'm listening to this. Some of this stuff I hadn't heard before.
That's why we're here. So we're going to get into sort of what it was like when the Miata was introduced, the mayhem of 1989. And you know how popular the car was when you were responsible for the NB. What was that responsibility like? What was it like being told, hey, you know our great little sports car? You get to change it.
Yeah, I mean, fair to say, it was a tall task. I often say, working on the NB for me always felt like I was the stepfather raising somebody else's kid. There was a lot of pressure. I mean, I was with Mazda a few years, Tom trusted me, but certainly with Bob and with Mark and with Tom, this was their baby, and they put a lot of heart into it. So there was a bit of pressure. We kind of started it a little different than the way it turned out. I'll talk a little bit about that tonight, but there was iterations that we went through before we got to a full body change, let's say. We tried to take a few steps. Our initial intent was we needed to get rid of the pop-up headlights for regulations, so we thought, could we just do that? And so we looked at just doing just a front end change, and we realized that wasn't enough, so then we went further with it. But there was a lot of pressure on me. I came from Chrysler, I'd worked on the Viper, so I had some experience with form and with convertibles, but it was no doubt working with the car with these guys looking down on me was kind of a little bit stressful, but at the same time, if there was anybody I could talk to get sense that this is what we should be doing, these were the guys who could give me direction. So on one hand, you know, like I said, like a father watching after his kid, like on the other hand, I was sort of a stepdad doing my thing, but didn't want to make sure I didn't mess it up. So yeah, there was a fair amount of pressure.
I'll bet. We had a question over, there we go.
Everybody thinks their own generation of Miata is the best. You all
So I'm just gonna amplify that for the folks who are watching at home. And it's basically, majority of you worked on the NA, some on the NB, obviously. What's your feeling on the, I guess, the direction the car took over time with the subsequent generations? Any thoughts on that? And remember, NC and ND owners are watching.
Thank you. No, I was just gonna say, I think they all have their own quality to them. I think every program had certain requirements and some restrictions. I think they've evolved really well over the years. Obviously, the NB was very much a direct descendant of the NA. The NC was a much kind of a completely new car in a sense, but also was carrying some underpinnings from RX-8. And then when we went to the ND, the main focus was could we get back to the purity of the NA, but with obviously with all the modern technology and packaging and crash safety requirements. So I think they all have a unique quality. I mean, I will say, walking through the paddock yesterday, there's some customization on some of them that are really well done. And so for me, like the NC, there was some work done in some of these cars customized that really made the car look good. And I think the other thing is, like, as a designer, it's usually the wheel to body relationship makes a huge difference on a car. And so when you see all of these here with wider wheels, to me they all look good. So it's very hard to like pick one out of the other. I'm partial to the NB, obviously, but we worked on the ND at Mazda in the last, obviously, early 2010s, and obviously to me that still has a lot of character what we put into it, but it's still a beautiful car. So I have no, like, other than the NB, I don't have any real particular favorite, but that said, I do own an NA, so I guess that.
Good answer. Mark, do you have any favorite?
I think Ken answered that question perfectly. Just the core consistency of all the cars, while every one of them has their own, uniqueness and their own flair. I personally, I worked on a lot of the detailing on the Mazda Speed Miata. We did some work programs on that. And we really got into that one. And there's something about that car that I particularly, I gravitate towards. And if I was to buy maybe a retro car, that might be the one I'd pick. But overall,
You just increased the price of Mazda Speed Miatas right there. The price just bumped
I
up.
mean, and out here, I've never seen so many NDs together, and I have to say that ND is pretty neat car. Pretty neat car. I remember at the introduction, I was a little surprised at some of the lines on that car. But it's really wearing well, and the fact I see that ND, and it really does look like they made a big effort to bring it back to the original NA. That is so flattering for the concept, the core consistency of the original concept.
I recuse myself from anything on the NA. I wasn't responsible. No one saw me. But I think that the B, C, and the D all are excellent vehicles, and good works of design. And they have a different flavor, but each one is a Miata. Okay? The NB was nice because it kept a lot of the compactness of the original, since they were carrying over a lot of the mechanical components. Yet it managed to be something new. It wasn't like a mild facelift. The NC is a car that I have a lot of respect for because it was made at an extremely difficult time with Mazda, with Ford calling a lot of shots. And basically, the situation was set up so that if they wanted to do the Miata, they had to do the RX-8. And if they wanted to do the RX-8, they had to do the Miata, and they had to share bits and pieces. In spite of that, and picking up the mass, I think the designers did a pretty good job of packaging it and making it look like a Miata. And indeed, when I first saw it, I got a bit of a preview. I was very impressed because it was like it had gone back to the start. Okay, and I admired the program manager and every designer and every engineer that worked on it because I'm going to say something that's very controversial here, and I apologize. If you're going to throw stuff at me, I'll move aside so they don't get hit. I think the NA is a better Miata ND by far and away is a much better car. It's got much more ability. Okay?
Oh,
Well said.
Wow. Okay, excuse me. For the styling part of it, that I thought first and second, 100 yards away, the car comes up to you, you feel it's a Miata. And 50 yards away, we're sure they're first or second. And then 20 feet away, you know it's the second or first, you know, you can tell the difference. And third generation, still the 100 yard away, you see it's a Miata. But at 50 years now, you know it's a third generation. That was the kind of distancing I wanted to separate the first, second, and third. And that we came through pretty good. And then I got out of Mazda and I got a call, said, we're gonna start the fourth gen. Do you have any ideas? I never planned that far. Because I'm in advanced design, I always think of it 25 years ahead of time, but that one is beyond the 25. I'm expired, you know, I'm already retired and out of Mazda, but they asked me about it. So the only thing I can say is 100 yard away has to be a Miata, because when you don't do that, bring in a car club like Miata Club here, that'll be isolated, different type of car. They break this, you know, break down the whole club activities like RX-7, it happened. So I want to keep it in the family no matter what you do. And then fourth generation, they said, okay, so if the mechanically very exciting, we could keep it more conservative. Or if you have same concept, then design could go a little bit further out, you know, instead of retro evolution. So that was a zone I drawn and said, okay, fourth generation has to be fit into this or that. And keep in retro way maybe what the Fiat ended up with. That's the one direction if we kept it on the retro side of the business. But we needed the fresher look that ND fits into that zone. But the night before the premiere of that car, they never show me until the night before and hide it. And I said, well, okay, don't you show me? Don't worry about it. We did it exactly what you wanted. But you know me, I don't do a poker face, you know? And tomorrow you took the cover off, I made a weird face like this, and then you're gonna live with that? It says, okay. So they gave the cover off. And I said, okay, you did a good job, because it fit the zone that I thought it would be. But that was what happened.
I just add that I was part of the development from the North American side.
Yeah.
The scope of that project was always like, how do we get it back to what the simplicity and the purity of the NA? And that was really the driving factor in design. I mean, the rear of the car, when you look at it, it's very narrow looking. It's got wide haunches, but it really looks like an NA from the back. It's got a very small, light detail. And the idea was really, how do we get, and that was the whole, every time you talked about the car, we had a design review, was how did it relate to the
Inertia.
really getting back to the honesty of that.
Yeah, the weight distribution, corner inertia, so they jumped the corner just for the handling purpose.
One more?
No,
Bob wants the
just a
microphone
quick
down.
comment on that.
One of the things that impressed me so much about the ND was it went back to the roots with the NA, but it did not pick up NA styling cues. And in that respect, there was nothing retro about it. The only thing retro, if you will, about it was it went back to the original starting point, which is not necessarily retro, it's just a great starting point.
So, since we're talking about sort of the styling and the direction of the car, in 1996, you came up with the M Coupe show car, or concept car. Beautiful little coupe. For those who haven't seen it in person, the detailing out and shaping on it is gorgeous. Why did Mazda not go forward with the coupe? I mean, obviously at this point we have the RF, which is pretty much a coupe with a power sunroof. There were the NB coupes in the in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
What happened in '96?
Okay, from the very onset, I want to have all different body shapes. Like Italian used to have Pininfarina do the coupe, Zagato did the lightweight, and Bertone the other. So I want to have a Miata have a separate frame so they can give it to those coach builders as well. That was the whole idea of it at the beginning. That's ended up with the center torque tube is reminiscent of a backbone frame anyway. Yeah, but, so that, what was the question again?
Why no coupe? in
Oh, yeah. So coupe is one of those elements, we have like Club Racer that Mark did for the auto show in Chicago. And I did the Speedster and then Monoposto. It's a whole line of cars that otherwise each coach builder would have built. And I wanted to make those show cars, so the book, again, the 20 years later, Mazda had a show car of this. We never intended to do a Monoposto or Club Racer, you know, like the Roadster, the Speedster. But I wanted to keep it on the record, so the book is more interesting than any other Japanese car companies do ever. So that's why I did all these show cars, to be honest. I mean, so that's one of them. Coupe was, I thought, we had established a convertible. Miata is a convertible, they're firmly set on ground. So we could introduce the coupe with a solid, much rigid body for the racing, lighter weight, and I think we could do that. And I wanted to have a retirement coupe, so that was for me to, I just cast extra piece for it for my retirement present to myself. Those guys didn't know about it, but, and then one day they needed a show car quick, so I had to pull out this extra set that I had, made a show car out of it, so I lost my retirement coupe. But that was the whole idea of it, okay? And then Japanese rejected, because if you do that, the convertible market in Japan will be destroyed. That was the answer. They didn't go ahead with it. And then today, the RF came in. Now in Japan, the majority are RF, not a two-seater, not the soft top. So prove the point what they said. If we did it that early on, convertible would be killed in Japan, which I didn't realize that much. And then another example is a ND. They took the speaker out of the headrest, and I love the speaker on NA. And that was a signature for the convertible, you know, like.
And it worked great.
Yeah, it works great too. But second gen, they took it off because the weight distribution is too high. They want to get the center of gravity lower, so they took that speaker out of it. And then Kijima-san did it, right? So I said one day, I said, don't worry about it, we got a bigger speaker there and sound quality the same. And I said, Kijima, what's your idea of a convertible? I said, is that you sounded like you're 90% top up, 10% top down. And our idea of a convertible is 90% top down, 10% top up. Did you test it on 90% top down? No, because his idea of a convertible is 10% top down. And I've known him for working with him for many, many years, and that one little difference between the concept or philosophy changed that decision so easily. That's how dangerous this international working together.
Everyone's got to have the same concept of the car. don't they?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts down here on the coupe, or why it took us so long to get a permanent hardtop?
I mean,
No.
one of the issues Mazda had, which is an issue a lot of companies would like, is they were doing real well at selling Miatas. And if they were gonna add a new body, there would be a likelihood that production could be disrupted. So, in one respect, it would be one of those things, let's save it for the NB. And as I recall, they did make an NB coupe.
There's one here.
Yeah, I saw it. So, and I left Mazda at this point in time. But I knowing what I know about the company, what I knew, they were, in fact, there was a lot of stuff they were concerned about with costs. And I would suspect that NA is nearing the end of production. They knew it. NB is coming. It would make sense to invest in an NA coupe. So they did an NB coupe, but then for some reason, in my mind, they really dropped the ball. Even in Japan. I mean, they only built what? Do you know, Ken, 1,200 or 1,100 of them?
What's up, I'm sorry.
NB coupes?
How many?
Yeah. Wasn't many, was it?
The other. No, I don't know. I mean, we did, there was a small batch of
Yeah.
NA coupes.
But I suspect, because the thing is, and one of the hardest things with the Miata at the start was volumes, because it's a mass production company. And, I had a meeting I got pulled into when I was in Japan again. And I got my brain picked about volumes. And one guy in the board of directors, Yamamoto, pulled me in. And he said, Bob, how many of these cars get sold in the States? And this is what, 1982. So we had these two wonderful, inexpensive to buy, not to run, open sports cars, the Fiat 124 in the Alfa Romeo, which I think is about 314 years old design. And I said, oh, current volume is between 4 and maybe 6,000 a year in a good year. And he looked at me and he said, you think we should spend 250 to 300 million US dollars for 4 or 6,000 cars a year? And Yamamoto was giving me this look. I said, oh, I'm pretty sure we can do better. And I was dismissed, and they still did the car. But no, Mazda was very concerned about costs. Very concerned. The paint was another one. We had originally planned 6 launch colors, and you ended up with 3. The Miata, now I'm getting into NB again, NA, excuse me, there was not a lot of belief internally in Miata that the Miata. And Mazda that the Miata was going to be a success. So they got a little bit maybe conservative about it. I think scared is a better term. You have to remember, we told them volume would be about 2,500 cars a month, okay, once we got it up and running. I think by the end of 1989, we were doing 4,000 a month. They launched the car in Japan in the following February, and Japan was expecting 200 to 600 a month. And by the middle of the year, Japan was doing 3,500 a month. So they were totally unprepared for this. And it was crazy. So that had a huge impact. But the company has always been concerned financially. They're willing to go and do weird technical stuff, okay? But they kind of kept an eye on the dollars and cents, or yen and sen.
Good point.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It's the same token, the Ken did a good, hard job on second gen. First generation, no marketing when I commit to the volume.
Yeah.
Because once you commit to the chairman, they had to sell it. So they keep in low numbers. They don't want to meet the target, right? So they set so low, and that almost killed the whole project because of the volume wouldn't sustain like Bob was talking about. But gut feeling of a Yamamoto said Mazda has to have one of those, and that's what pushed it through. All the MG guys said, how did you manage to sell that idea to the management? Because we've been doing it for years, it never happened. So, wow, I think we are lucky. No, it's really lucky in a many different ways. Bob, all of us there with some kind of a convertible experience in our lives, at the same time at the same place, and chairman wanted to prove to the world Mazda have a studio in US could come up with a very creative, locally fitting product, and that's what the MPV and the Miata. We proposed that the first time we did it. If we waited 6 months, that wouldn't have happened. If we did the MPV no-brainer, they went ahead with it. But a second time we put Miata, they wouldn't be doing it because chairman didn't need to prove his point. But like all the timing and everything is perfectly done. We couldn't have done it even 6 months apart, wouldn't have happened. So that's why we are fortunate that we are there at the right time.
So in 1989, for those of you who weren't there, that was a crazy summer, wasn't it? I mean, the Miata mania hit hard. The car exploded in the market. And
yeah, so the marketing don't want to touch it, right? So nobody say anything, just do whatever, because we don't want to take any responsibility.
It's just
second gen, because sold so well, the Japanese marketing was so quiet in NA, now all of a sudden they want to do this and this and that. In US the same way, all the marketing start to come up with all the wish and wants there. So that was a harder thing. And in Japan always wanted to have 4 years of one direction, then they go 360, 180 degrees to get newness be newness. So they have to switch. So they proposed all round headlamp Porsche-like front end. And we proposed in this evolution design, I said, what's so new? They didn't understand that the evolution of continuing for 10 years to keep the brand, keep the identity. So we had to fight so hard because all of a sudden marketing put the volume higher that we cannot control anymore. That was a tough game.
So I want to hear some personal stories. You folks were all there in 1989, and you were driving around in early production cars. You were often the first Miata people saw. I want to hear some stories about what that was like. What was it like basically driving around in a rock star car in 1989? What were the interactions with the public like?
Well, I think that was Norman with the Santa Barbara would be the best one.
Yeah, well, that's before you.
That's before 89.
Yeah.
Talk about, Norman drove this proof of concept vehicle he had, and unfortunately I didn't bring it with me. A German company makes a model of the proof of concept vehicle, and I've never ever seen that in my life.
wow.
The die-cast company makes something as esoteric as that yet. And I had to buy one, and I could finally track one down in Australia. Go figure.
Oh, Australia.
Yeah. I went to a pre-launch they had for dealers, and it was held at the Grand Ole Opry or something down there. And they brought the car out, and it was a standing ovation. These guys, they just said and they didn't tell us the sports, but a new car we want to show you. And the dealers went completely ballistic. And they were good ballistic, and they told them the price, and they were like, wow. And then at the Chicago show, and this gets maybe a little bit personal, there was a weird situation in America because there were 3 different distributors. And the distributor in Chicago was in Illinois, Midwest was one company, and down the South was another, West was another. And they, before the car came out, they looked at Mariner Blue and said, we don't want any of these. Don't send us any Mariner Blue. So in their orders, they didn't order any. So that was Mark's Club Racing, Club Sport. Club Racing was shown, the yellow one, which attracted a lot of attention. And we had 4 cars on the stand that posted red, white, blue. So we deliberately put 1 red, 1 white, and 2 blue on the stand. About 2 weeks after the show, and the show was fantastic. Everybody was, I went down excited to see the NSX. Did you see the NSX? They go, no, see the MX-5. And everybody was talking about the Miata. Nobody was talking about the NSX. And these are journalist guys I knew, and I felt very good about that, actually. But the importer, the seller, the marketing people said, we need blue, we need blue. I said, you told us we didn't need, you didn't want any blue, we didn't order any for you. So they had this huge backlog, and they were buying Mariner Blue cars from other states and paying well over retail. But that's okay, because as I recall, I went to the Mazda dealer in Monrovia, California, and out of curiosity went in to see what they had. And this would have been October of the year, and it was only $4,500 over sticker. Okay, and this is on a $14,000 car, and it even said special price adjustment. Yeah, right.
More things change, right?
Yeah.
I just kind of add to that. As I said, at the time I was with Chrysler, and I worked on the Viper, which obviously became a pretty successful car. And to Bob's point, the Chicago, I wanted to buy a rear drive car, looking at a 200 SX. And then all of a sudden I started seeing these little stories about this car that Mazda was bringing out, this rear drive convertible. So in February of '89, the car was shown at the Chicago Auto Show, and Mark had done the Club Sport. And I remember 2 of my buddies from Chrysler, we flew to Chicago for the day, saw the car, fell in love with the Club Sport, was like, yeah, this is exactly what I want, just as Mark was talking about. Came back to Michigan, went to the dealership, put a deposit down on the car. They didn't know when it was going to be coming out. Ordered it, finally came in July, went and picked it up, I think it was July 3rd of '89. And again, at the time of Chrysler, you gotta remember it was the K car era at Chrysler. And at that time in America, it was the Chrysler LeBaron was the hot car. It was like, that was the convertible, diamond tough leather interior and everything. And I had purchased the Miata, and I told the guys, the tech guys, and I brought it into the studio. And to a man, they all laughed at me, like, how much did you pay for that? God, what a piece of junk. Look at the door panels, they're just simple cardboard. And I'm like, guys, you don't understand. It's like, you gotta drive it to really appreciate it. And their mindset was such that, like, the LeBaron was the convertible, why would you spend money on that? And, you look back now and you think of the history of the Miata and how successful it's been. But, this vision, people didn't always really quite get what made the car so great. And then again, I came out to California after that, and the car fit. The Chrysler LeBaron's no longer, and now we have 4 generations of MX-5 and 600 cars here this weekend. So I think Mazda had the right idea when they brought out the Miata.
And there's somewhere out there, there's someone with a collector 1989 LeBaron just crying a little bit.
Yeah, what was
what was the Maserati version? They did a
Oh,
Oh, the
Maserati.
T,
yeah.
right,
TC.
Maserati TC
Yeah,
by
yeah, the
Chrysler.
TC, yeah, yeah.
Excuse me. No, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I
You
just
guys-
wanted to comment about the Chicago show, because I traveled with Bob, and then we had a couple of people that had worked on the club racer that were there, just in case we had any accidents, we needed some repaired on the spot, but it was that day, it was in February 1989, and that particular day, when we were loading all the cars, they had all the doors open in the convention center. It was 10 degrees below zero. And we all had coats on and scarves around our neck and this and that. And I remember, and of course we had no idea how big the Miata was going to be at that time. But I just remember, this is a little strange that we were world premiering this open top car and it's 10 degrees below. But what I wanted to say was, after all was said and done, the Chicago show, yeah, there's a lot of interest in that. We were there for a day, okay? And we go back and say, oh, it looks like it was a hit. We had no idea the avalanche of the press coming. But what I wanted to tell you, what really astounded me in the end was that the Miata got more press of any car, any domestic U.S. car, except for the 65 Mustang.
Yeah, that's right.
That's second in line.
64 and a half.
Okay.
April 12th,
But
1964.
I always admired that fact. I always like to, tell people that, because that was pretty surprising. But anyways, we had, so Bob and I were assigned to do the press. It was crazy. We had all the major publications. We had Forbes, we had Time, we had People Magazine.
Well,
we
that's
had,
right, you guys in people, yeah.
yeah, we had all of the Associated Press printed things all around the country about the car. We had our local, the LA Times, the New York Times, all that. So it was, for a while, it was just constant photographers. Give us a couple hours, we're gonna take a picture of you and interview you and this and that. And then there was videos being made. So, hey, it was flattering. It was really flattering, but that's when we started to realize, this thing is like a snowball.
Yeah.
And then there was more demand than supply. Everything just caught us off guard.
So after the Chicago, we start getting this envelope with a cash inside. I don't know how they got my address or his name or whatever. We start getting this money in envelope to put them down for the, faster delivery on the waiting list. And I went to the legal department and said, don't open it, just return it. So, but that was how, every day I got a 10 or 20 envelopes with the money in it. We could have retired with that one.
I guess the point at which I realized that this had really hit home, it must have been about, I suspect it was around March, April. We got a call from Nihon Honso Kyokai, NHK, the Japanese government broadcaster, and they wanted to come and talk to us about the Miata. Now the car was not sold in Japan at this time. And they came over and they interviewed me, I think they interviewed Mark, and we did some stuff in the studio. And then they disappeared, and they talked to Mr. Yamamoto in Japan. And he was effusive in the praise for the Americans, which surprised the hell out of me. And they interviewed him twice, because after that, my interview, of course, was the subtitle were done in Japanese. Then they took one on NHK World, which is an international broadcast, and that went out. And Yamamoto is there in his English with his wonderful accent. The Americans inspired me. And I said, maybe this is gonna go.
Did you have a story about?
I have a Miata story from '88 when it was leaked, when Ron Bymester made the choice of the name for Miata. I was driving an air-cooled Porsche at the time, and I ran down to the DMV and got a Miata license plate from North Carolina. And I'm driving around until July with this Miata. Everybody keeps asking, what's that? And I said, oh, you'll see, you'll see. And then when I got my Mariner Blue Miata, moved the plate over, and then it had a rightful home, but I had the first Miata plate in the United States.
But it was on.
No,
I gotta say this, it was appropriate because Miata is old high German for prize and reward, and it was on a German car, so it was fine.
exactly. Yeah, so the name was leaked before the car, I guess.
So you said you took that up to an autocross in 1988.
Right.
So that was probably the competition debut of the Miata.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was. It was competing against the clock, but yes, it was indeed competition. That's true.
It's telling that right now we're holding this conversation at a racetrack. You can hear the cars in the background roaring around. It's become such a core part of the car.
Very satisfying that it is the most raced car in the world ever. If you take the cumulative number of people that have ever been on a track at the wheel of a Miata in A, B, C, or D, it's far superior, surpasses anything. So it's kind of amazing.
Was that part of the design brief, the expectation that it would become a highly raced car, or was that just an
yeah.
accident?
We did. Actually, Norman proved it, because he was private citizen Norman at this time. Okay, he was a customer that bought it and showed, yeah, absolutely, there's the proof of the pudding.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and that's something that just goes to some, what we thought was going to happen happened. And what better lesson to be taught than by a buyer?
Well, and that's, the core from the beginning, when we talked about it in the speeches this morning, that Mark did a sketch of like an E-production chop-down, no windshield racer very early in the program. Long before the shape was finished, it was to be a spec or an E-spec or something race car from the beginning. And that goes back to the core of it. Again, a lightweight sports car that's affordable, that is for the masses, that is tunable and modifiable, if that's a word, by the customers to do as they wish, including racing, was at the core. Yeah. But a true sports car is an athletic analogy. Sports, in the term, as an adjective to a car, means it is athletic. It is something for competition. So we thought from the beginning it had to be, and the best sports cars are. And when you look at the Fiat 124s, the Alphas, the MGBs with solid rear axles, they were saddling exercises and some marketing plays with cost constraints. And just a short little 20-word plug for Mazda Japan, to be able to find the power plant frame, the double witch ones, the four-wheel discs, everything, the correct damping, the shocks, the engine tuned correctly, all of that within the budget of the target price for the car is an amazing feat, a tremendously amazing feat. And it's a trifecta of a 1,000-kilogram car, 2,200 pounds or less, 30-mile-an-hour crash, good insurance rating, all of that, plus a joy to drive. That's all great for the public, but if you didn't love the way it felt when you drove around a corner at 6,000 RPM and third, you wouldn't keep the car. The Solstice, many other cars in this genre are attractive enough, but they just they can't be raced well. And if they can be raced well, then they can be loved on the road even without racing. So there's a core athletic nature to the chassis all the way through all the series that really came out of the beginning. But yeah, racing was there from day one.
That's why you saw.
Yes.
No, that's what we saw. The whole idea was that, but a Japanese engineer worked on it. They thought it was not a racing car.
Really?
Because the numbers never say it's a winning car, right? Any numbers, your performance, that wasn't really a racing winning combination. So our engineer thought, they're not going to be a racer. I said, well, it's going to be a club racing all over. So you guys took over the prototype to the Willow Spring, remember?
Right.
And then like a second and a half slower than the tuned Civic CRX came back. And you proved that stock car would do that, the tuned car would be far easier to beat them, right? Now what's happened today is the most raced car in the world, in a sense, in every given weekend. But our engineer didn't think that was the case. So all in all though, I just want to say that was our dream, to have a car that we can afford to have a fun. Because like Bob said, all the cars are either too expensive or too old that we couldn't rely on driving it every day. So first customer is us as a target customer. And our sort of wish and indulgence created the car, but I'm lucky that we found so many of you that have the same feeding too. So every time, everybody says thank you, but really thank you for loving this thing. I just wanted to say that. Without you guys, we wouldn't be here today and talk about that too.
I again, give you guys the reason that the car is here, okay? It doesn't get any simpler than that. And just with the earlier comment about engine swaps and improved performance, that's great, okay? But we never intended it to be, as we presented, a high-performance car. It was supposed to be a high-enjoyment car, okay? Then a little performance, just dial it in a little bit, That's what it's all about. If you can't go faster than 90 horsepower, 900 horsepower ain't gonna help you.
Very true.
On behalf of the aftermarket, I apologize for that.
Oh,
That's what we
Market
need.
equipment that will give you 900 horsepower in the market is a good value. Everybody should buy it right now.
No, we wanted to have a healthy aftermarket with this car as a whole culture. People who make parts make a living out of it. That's great, because that's a whole community of things you need to have to be a car to be sustained the life today. I went to the engineer that, is there any way we can store the sheet metal for 20, 30 years in like a can, like in a can, oil can, like sardine, and then release it 30 years later for the NA restoration kit? They look at me and say, you're crazy. But that's what we needed, the whole philosophy of bring it back.
I'm probably not the only one here who wants to read your history of the Miata from 20 years later that you were writing back in the 80s. We do have a couple of questions out here. I'm going to go to the back here.
I knew that Mazda had used the rotary engine on several models. Was there any talk of it in the Miata project at any point in time? And if so, what's the story there?
So I'm going to amplify that. The question is the rotary question. We all know the rotary question. Why not Mazda's signature engine?
It was, the kibosh was put on that from before the beginning by Yamamoto. Okay? His viewpoint was, if you have a rotary car, you have a piston car, you have two cars, not just a variant of one. And he understood that the idea was to get as broad a base to work from. And so he basically, there were guys who said, we should put a rotary. And the word came down, filtered through the system, it was Yamamoto saying, no rotary. And this guy's the father of the rotary, so you can't question it. I mean, you couldn't anyway, he was signing my checks.
I did run one package with the rotary engine. And rotary engine, the center line of the eccentric shaft is in the center of the small beer keg, if you will. And it's a much more difficult thing to package the cowl area. So while it could be done, it would increase a lot of compromises in the cowl area, raise the hood line, which these guys would have not let me do. So it was, to use the word kibosh, there were it died a few deaths on the way to the proposal.
And there were studies done, but when they got to the point of approval, they all just evaporated. And that was because of the guideline from El Jefe.
Yeah. Well, and Bob's original treatise on what the car was to feel like was we wanted the NVH, the vibration and noise of a four-cylinder engine, because that's what all the sports cars from Europe that we had grown up with were in the lightweight sports class. So it's kind of a character issue, but I think you punctuated it best, is that to have two rotary cars in the line was not the ultimate goal.
A little too close to the RX-7.
A little too close.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Just one thing on the little too close. When we first started the project, when the first clay model was being studied, we had permission to ask the man in charge of marketing at the Pacific MMA, who was a very nice guy and a very smart guy. And he was aware that the SA was going to be replaced by the FC on the RX-7 side. And we said, we want to come and see this. We want to show it to you and tell you about it. And he said, is it a sports car? I said, yeah. He says, do you like it? He says, it's fine. I don't want to see it. And I said, how come? He says, because I got to worry about selling SAs before the new one comes. Okay? So there is, this reality of you got a car, you got to be able to move it. And he trusted us enough that he didn't even want to know.
I'm just going to translate. SA is the first generation RX-7. Yeah. FB is the second.
No.
FC is the
FC. Nobody knows where FB went.
Nobody knows where
Nobody
FB
knows.
went.
Wait, is she an
If you have the FB RX-7, please write in.
Please, right? Where's Waldo?
Do you have any more questions over here? We do, from the internet.
We had a couple from the internet, and they're kind of sort of oddly related, and they're more speculation than anything. So I'm gonna combine a couple of them. And one is, how do you feel about Miata having more horsepower? Do you think Mazda will ever offer a higher horsepower or turbo version again, or are you guys happy with where it's at because it keeps the original spirit of the car?
So the question on that one is basically, what are your thoughts on high horsepower factory Miatas or higher horsepower factory Miatas? It's never been a terribly powerful car in the market. Even the Mazda 3 Turbo was not exceptionally overpowered. What are your feelings on that, and what do you think Mazda will ever offer a higher output variant?
Well, I guess we're all getting greedy because the NB 181 horsepower is really a high horsepower engine compared to the NA. So, given that it has the power to weight ratio, it's not really just horsepower, which is a marketing number sometimes. It's the area of the torque curve and the acceleration performance of the car and its weight. So an ND with 181 peak horsepower is a phenomenal combination and still insurable. So you have to enter that, and we talked about that this morning. If the car's impossible to insure, it's impossible to sell. So it's a fine balance now. Mazda has always from the beginning let the aftermarket be the place for those customers who want to have very high horsepower variants to consummate that. So the turbos, chips, whatever you want to do to get to the 250 horse level, there's a point where the chassis doesn't want to see too many more horsepower, or there's torque under the curve. So there's a fine tune how you can really ruin a Miata, but chassis by taking it to a too high level. But for a production 30, 40,000 unit a year market, the 181 number is a phenomenal horsepower level. And again, if you want more, we have Keith.
Thank you for that one.
No, again, it's, the price point of Miata was that we don't want to have a high insurance cost. It's a very sensitive market. So if we add another 20 horsepower, bracket of the insurance goes up to another level. So the cost of ownership gonna be so different from where we ended up with. And again, the marketing wasn't so confident at the beginning, so we couldn't really go any further. But again, it's a way to keep the affordability in a sense of not just the price of the sale of the car, but a maintenance, keeping the car into the insurance costs and all that.
Well, and weight comes into it as well, doesn't it? Because of course, as you increase the power and the torque, you just start beefing up basically everything else, the suspension, the structure. For those who haven't spent a lot of time underneath a Mazda Speed Miata, the number of detail changes made to that car that we wouldn't necessarily think of in the aftermarket. Things like larger CV joints on the rear half shafts. I mean, we don't rate those, but for Mazda's reliability requirements, they were required. So extra horsepower does come at a cost, of course, of weight and design intent of the car.
Mazda also has they had a bad historical experience regarding insurance. And the FD RX-7 was absolutely loved by people in this 18 to 25 group. And it was totally uninsurable for them. Okay? And it was a factor in the FD getting pulled from the US market well before the car went out of production. Because the people that wanted it couldn't afford to insure it. And Mazda looked long and hard at doing self-insurance internally for cars for FD. And in the end, the numbers just didn't make sense. So when USA Mazda said we really don't want any more of these, it didn't work. So insurance is a factor.
Very much. Good question.
And this is probably going to be our last question because we're just about out of time here. So you are the lucky winner.
Just a comment on that, I'd like to drive the Miata sports car on the regular roadways because it doesn't have so much horsepower that you just can't use it. But aside from that, what's the difference between the naming of the Miata and the MX-5 and the Evolution? How did the naming come about and what's going on now with, it's always confusing to me, is it an MX-5 or Miata?
So first there was a comment there about how you can still enjoy a Miata on public roads at stock power levels, which of course you can. They're great for that. I would like to point out from the higher perspective standpoint that any 300 horsepower car is also a 100 horsepower car if you don't press the throttle quite as far.
Revving up to the 6 or 7,000 RPMs and first or second gear.
It is the whole slow car fast thing is definitely a factor. That is true. The other question is what's with the MX-5 and Miata names? Okay, it's confusing.
when the project was lit up and it was a go project, gentlemen at Mazda, we didn't know what the heck. We had, I think one of the photos that we have that shows a number plate says 1600S. And that was what we considered from the design department. You're allowed to work for name, let's put it on. The guy who was in charge of marketing for the sports cars, Rod Weinmaster, really good at it. Okay, he was a marketing guy, not a sales guy. And he started hunting around and he wanted a name, and he came across Miata, which is Old High German for prize and reward. And that worked fine, but he got to Japan and he said, oh, we need to have MX number. It needs to have MX number. So they came up with MX5 because it was less than MX6 and it was more than the MX3 they were thinking about. So that's where MX5 came from. But they still used Miata. Now, Miata came across one very interesting issue, and that is that it had the phonetics with a company called Miata, a Japanese company that made bicycles. And because they were both wheeled vehicles, rather than have a lawsuit, Mazda cut a deal with Miata, which was owned by, I forgot, the people I think that owned Fujitsu radios. And the deal they cut was they were all going to have Fujitsu 10 radios. And that's the end. For some reason, they decided to let the Miata name lapse. I think, is it still officially on the ND?
Well, I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how the legally bounding agreement or not, but after a while, Miata is more successful than the bicycle itself, right? So I went back to headquarters. He said, anyway, we negotiated the whole deal so they can do the bicycle name Miata.
That's called Miata in the first place.
Well, that's when everybody started doing the bicycle. Mercedes have a bicycle, you know, like the whole cycling boom. So what if we had a smaller bicycle fits in the Miata, developed by that company, and have them use our name? It would be bigger business for them. So why don't you go back and renegotiate? Never happened.
The Miata.
Yeah, well, yeah. But it's only if you write it down as Miata is Myata.
That's the
It's
cycle.
nothing to do with the Miata, but they just sort of that being an issue.
Well, I remember back in that era, a lot of Mazda products had actual names. I mean, there was the Protege and the Familia.
In the U.S. market.
In the U.S. market.
Yeah, but Japan is not.
They prefer the letters and numbers.
Yeah,
No,
because
Japan
this
had
is the
names.
only country with a, old telephone with ABC on the letters and numbers. So TV commercials, Lincoln 5555.
buddy.
And I first came here and said, what's this Lincoln 5? Then I realized that was the letters on the pad. So that's the only country in the world that had the letters on them. So I figure Americans like a nickname rather than the numbers. Now, later on, a lot of companies do numbers because the high-end BMW, Mercedes does numbers. They start putting in numbers are more of a premium branding. But for the the regular people to remember the name, nickname is better for U.S. market. That's what the marketing went to the Miata name. Yeah.
Yeah, the Mazda domestic models had names like Familia, Cosmo, Luce, that one. It was real common for Japanese companies to have names on cars that then got numbered when they went to export.
Yeah.
So example, you had a Nissan Bluebird that became a 510 when it was here. Okay? The funny story I ever heard about this, I'll deviate a bit, is Nissan decided to launch one of their big luxury cars in Australia. It's called the Cedric. And at the press launch, I'm not joking, this is the question that was asked, okay? Cedric was like Bruce, and this Aussie journalist said, Cedric's a common name amongst homosexuals here. and the Nissan guy said, are there many homosexuals in Australia? And the guy said, yes. He says, we will sell a lot of cars. I'm not kidding about that. So it's the first time a Japanese guy ever got an Aussie snotty-nosed journalist back and got him back real good. But no, Japanese people tend to prefer names on cars. The numbers the Familia was a 323 here. Okay, the 626, which became Mazda 6, was a Capella. It's only later that Mazda started using names in Japan, and that's where we got Mazda 6, Mazda 3, everything the same worldwide. And Mazda was probably one of the Japanese companies that decided to go for this global naming before anybody else did.
So that probably didn't help with clearing up the confusion with the MX-5 versus Miata Formula. We are unfortunately out of time. I would sit here and talk with you guys all day. This is fantastic. Thanks for everyone for sticking around and watching. It's been a real pleasure getting a peek into the history of the car, obviously that we all love, and its development and the ideas behind it, the philosophy behind it. So thanks again for doing this. Thanks again for everyone watching. We will have this live streamed. We will have this available later if you want to watch it over and over again. That's pretty much it. Thanks for your attention, everyone.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you.